Good morning and welcome to Friday's devotion of hope, faith, and joy. I'm glad that you could join me as we take a look at the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14 today. So we find that Jesus starts out this chapter with a healing of a man with dropsy. And what I thought was kind of interesting is that in the last chapter, previous chapters, Jesus would just go ahead and heal someone. But in this chapter, he kind of starts to switch things up. And he then asks the Pharisees, should I do this? And so he kind of silences them before he does his healing. So he's kind of switching things up at this point in time. But then Jesus goes on in chapter 14 to teach us about hospitality through a couple of his stories that he does. And the first one is that he's at a dinner and he's kind of teaching them how they should and shouldn't do things. And he warns them that you shouldn't choose the highest position to sit at the dinner because you would be super embarrassed if the host came along and said, I need you to move. Somebody more important is here. What he says is that you should go ahead and just take the lowest position at the table and then allow the host to say, oh, please, no, we've got a space up here for you. We want you to sit up here. And so he then tells us that it is humility that will get us into the kingdom of heaven. And this is really important for the Pharisees to hear this because, of course, all of them are claiming that due to their righteous living, their righteous lives, they feel that they are guaranteed a spot in heaven. And Jesus is warning them, you should be living your lives as if you don't have a spot in heaven. And so it's kind of important for us, too, to recognize, do we live our lives and walk around like, oh, yeah, this is earning me my good spot? Or are we aware that we're trying our best and we're not really sure? And we're just hoping that if we get in the end of the line, then we'll be happy to be a part of the parade in heaven. And so he's just kind of saying humility is the best way. After this, he has another story about those who have been invited to the great banquet, compared to heaven. And people have their excuses as to why they can't come. They have their jobs, they have their possessions they need to worry over, they have their families to worry over. And what happens is that they're just like, the timing's wrong for me. And this king's like, sorry, this banquet's happening. And so what happens is then he goes out and invites the less fortunate, the less wealthy, and anybody in the streets was welcome to become part of this banquet. And I think it's important for us to recognize that now is the time to be working on our relationship with God. We might have busy work schedules. COVID might be disrupting all of our patterns. We have all these reasons, like timing's just bad right now, or I'm too tired. But the banquet is now, and we've been invited. And so either you're making your excuses and you're going to miss out, or you're doing what you can to answer the call. And so Jesus then goes into this section that we call the cost of discipleship. Being a follower of Jesus does mean it's going to be rough. And he says some hard things in this little section. And he says that whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Now, I think we have a different perspective of what hate means. And so I don't want us to think about it as this anger kind of thing. But what Jesus is saying is our priorities have to be in the right order. And I know in today's times you want to make your family first, you want to put your job first, there's all these things, but Jesus is like, no, I have to be your number one priority. Otherwise, you're not really following me. And he recognizes that anything worth doing comes at a price. And he uses these examples of building a tower and going to war. In both cases, there are going to be losses. There is going to be pain. There is a cost to it. And you have to decide if it's going to be worth it. And of course, Jesus says yes. I mean, you're going to gain the kingdom of heaven. So for him, of course, everything's worth the cost for that. But he does say that you've got to sit down and know that you're not going to get to have the life you want when you follow Jesus. You're going to be receiving a life that Jesus wants for you. And so, it's kind of just a hard chapter today. And then he speaks to us about the salt. But if salt loses its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? And it's just a reminder to us as we kind of head into the weekend that we've got to pay attention to how we're living our lives, because if we start to dilute ourselves, it's hard to get back into it. It's hard to get back into the life of Jesus. And I just think about my own experiences, I have to get away to get my saltiness stronger, or whatever you want to call it. But if I allow my devotions to go kind of by the wayside, it's harder and harder to come back. Because the easy life is easy, but it's not worthwhile. Doesn't give me great joy, but I do find that it's harder to get back to the joy of being a faithful disciple when I lose my saltiness. And so I think that's something good for us to pay attention to, that we have to continue to work at it. Otherwise we can delude ourselves. And that's not what we want. It's not what we want. We want to become more pure in our actions, more loving, more compassionate. And God's calling us to that. But it's going to take our work. It's going to take a little cost. But that's what God wants with us. And so, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you next week as we look at chapter 15. And thanks for joining me with Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotions. Bye.